Welcome to the Oxygen Advantage podcast with your host, Oxygen Advantage founder Patrick McKeown. With the Oxygen Advantage podcast, we aim to show how functional breathing is an essential part of a healthy and well-balanced lifestyle. Each episode, we meet experts in their field from around the world and talk about their lives, their experiences, and how they learned the importance of breathing. Join us and get inspired. Get the Oxygen Advantage.
Conversation with Scott Baptie, and Scott is a well-known author of many books. I think you've 4 or 5 books, Scott, all about nutrition. And this is quite new in our domain because we talk mainly about breathing, and I don't know very much. In actual fact, I'll say I know nothing about nutrition. So this is going to be a learning curve for me. And I'm hoping at the end of 60 minutes, Scott, that I have very tangible advice in terms of the food that I should be eating and the food that I shouldn't be eating and weight loss and all of your journey. Can you just give us a bit of background about yourself? How did you get into it?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me on. I'm really looking forward to speak to you and your audience. How did I get into it? Well, if we go back to a young, early 20s me, I was really into the gym and nutrition and trying to eat better to support my lifting in the gym. And I set up a blog. And on there, I posted about the workouts I was doing and what I was eating and so on. And then from there, people started following it and then offering me money to write them a meal plan. So at this point, I had absolutely no qualifications. I only had the experience and things that I'd done or worked out through trial and error and reading blogs and journals and so on. And then that just, one thing led to another. I ended up quitting my job at the time. Went back to uni, did a master's in sports nutrition, and they say that the rest is history. But in amongst that time as well, it's changed now because back then, a lot of my clients were the same kind of demographic as me. I mean, I was early to mid 20s, hitting the gym all the time. I did a bit of fitness modeling. I've been on a couple of the fitness mags over here, and now I'm knocking on the door of 40, and that's completely. Audience has changed and my approach has changed, so it's way more inclusive and much more flexible because there are other demands on my time and what I can make. Like, I've got 2 kids, and yeah, it's really different how it's evolved. But the core principles of nutrition, I think, are still the same. I'm still practicing and preaching about the same methods of simplicity and avoiding unnecessary restriction and focusing on basics and trying to avoid a lot of the noise that there is around nutrition and the fear that people have of quote unquote good and bad foods and certain supplements they feel they must take. And a lot of the time I'm telling people they don't need to do things rather than things they do need. So it's, no, you don't need to do that. You don't need to do this, rather than you must have this at this time and it must be from this south-facing mountain and it's the goat tongue blended in this powder and it will cost you, 200 euros per gram. It's half the time that's not the case. Not half. That's nonsense. 99.9% of the time it's not the case.
So there's a lot of marketing and hype that comes into the nutrition world. And of course, nutrition is scalable too. So yeah, it's unfortunate, in terms of that aspect of it. 2 things you said there, accessibility and simplicity. So can you just dive a bit deeper in that?
Sure. So in terms of simplicity, you need to look at, imagine food as a hierarchy of importance. So we've got things at the bottom that are extremely important and we should be focusing most of our attention on. And then as you start to progress up through the pyramid, up towards the hierarchy, they're less important and you don't need to spend so much time. So at the bottom, we have basic things like food quality, looking at making sure the food you're eating by and large is nutritious. We hear about 80% of the time eating quality, fresh, whole foods. We're not saying 100%. Again, that's an issue a lot of people have when they say, right, I'm not eating chocolate, I'm not having any sweets, I'm not having any crisps, I'm not having any processed food. And then it becomes like a diet because these habits that they try and do for the short term are so unlike their normal forms of eating that they just want to rebel against it, or they can't wait until this excessive regime is over. So when we talk about health eating and making changes, or I talk to the listener right now, if you hear anything in this podcast that sounds quite good and you can relate to it, just think about adding in one or two of these changes without doing anything too extreme. So we want to try and get to the point that we're just eating normally, and that becomes our normal form of eating rather than trying to, do it for 30 days. So a lot of that is, yes, making it enjoyable and not cutting out things excessively. So we're saying 80% of the time, quality, whole, nutritious foods. Then you have things like making sure you're consuming enough calories, enough to match your energy demands, especially for the listeners who are perhaps exercising at a higher intensity. They're going to require more calories than someone who's sedentary. So make sure your energy demands are met. Then looking at macronutrients, so protein, carbohydrates, and fat, making sure you're getting enough protein. You're not going on a crazy low-carb diet, for example, if you're doing a lot of activity and generally require more carbs, and you don't have this fear of fat. So it's balance. Then further up, you've got things like the timing of it, and then further, even higher, you've got supplements. And I think a lot of people get it muddled up. And the first thing they do, for example, when they start exercising is, I'll have a protein shake, without really paying attention to how much protein are they eating in the diet as a whole. Do they even need a protein shake? Would it not be more beneficial to maybe reduce the 2 liters of fizzy juice you're drinking every day instead, rather than having a protein shake? So it's looking at priorities. And the point on accessibility, you can eat a healthy diet for most people listening to this by just going to your local supermarket and seeing what's available there. You don't have to go to expensive health food shops or buy fancy supplements off the internet that you can't source locally. Most of the time, the majority of your food should just be available to you without great expense or great inconvenience.
Our strength and conditioning coach is a Scotsman like yourself, Will McGibbon, and he's here every Tuesdays and Thursdays, and he puts us through our penalties or punishment, as we can call it sometimes. He's very much into protein as well, and very often when I hear about protein, I'm thinking about a steak. So why is protein so important? Why is there such an emphasis on it? Now, his take on it is that if you eat protein, it kind of switches off your appetite. So it'll help to reduce food cravings. Can you just go a little bit deeper into that one as well? And does it have to be a steak, or are there other forms? So what are the benefits of protein, and what to eat?
So there's a bit of the misconception that protein was for people who are trying to bulk up and bodybuilders, and more protein. If you start eating more protein, you'll instantly grow huge muscles and you'll be looking like Arnold Schwarzenegger in his prime. If only it were that easy to build muscle. So protein helps to recover from exercise. So generally, as you are exercising more, your protein requirements increase slightly, not to the excessive levels that people think you need to be eating, 50 grams of chicken 8 times a day. Just you'll have to eat a higher protein intake. So yeah, it helps you to recover from exercise and rebuild the muscles that have been damaged through sport, and it helps you to grow and recover. From a satiety point of view, that is also correct what your strength and conditioning coach said. So for people who are just trying to feel fuller for longer, protein is excellent because it suppresses certain hormones that make you feel hungry, and it also takes slightly longer to break down than carbohydrates and fat, and you get what's called a thermic effect. So it actually requires more energy to digest protein than it does carbohydrates and fat. So if you are someone who is trying to lose weight, for example, a higher protein diet has been shown time and time again in the research to be beneficial because of those increased feelings of satiety. If you're feeling fuller for longer, you're less likely to snack and grab more convenient foods that are maybe much higher in calorie and lower in food volume. So that's why it's beneficial there. And that's why there is the more understanding now that a high protein diet is not just for bodybuilders and athletes, it is for people who simply want to feel fuller for longer and feel better after exercising.
There was a photo of you with your 6-pack looking pretty manly there just some time ago when I was looking at it. In terms of building up that muscle, do you take creatine as well? Like, what do you do? And what's your take on that? Is that something that's advised?
So yeah, I use creatine. The only supplements I use a multivitamin. I take vitamin D between October and April. I use some whey protein in the morning with my breakfast. So was it, yeah, vitamin D, multivitamin, creatine, and whey protein. Yeah. So a lot of supplements that are pushed out on people have very limited evidence to the point of it's probably not going to make any difference. But creatine, which you mentioned there, is one of those substances that has an incredible amount of research. It's one of the most researched sports supplements. I think it's just behind caffeine. And it has, I think it was like 9 out of 10 studies show a 10 to 15% performance improvement. So for someone who is trying to build muscle like myself or increase strength in the gym, it is certainly useful and can help. But looking again at that hierarchy of importance, I'm supplementing with creatine because I'm doing everything below it in the pyramid right. I'm consuming nutrient-dense fresh foods for the majority. I'm matching energy demands and so on. And only then am I thinking about creatine. Another supplement there, while talking about protein, is protein powder. And we said, some people think it's the first thing to do when they start working out, buy a tub of protein and have it. Now, there's nothing unique about protein in powder form. It's a high-quality source of protein, but you certainly don't need to have it. You can get all the benefits from whole foods, plant-based or animal-based. So you could have some chicken after a workout. If you're having 30 grams of protein in the chicken, it's going to do much and such the same as the scoop of protein. The protein scoop or powders or even the ready-to-drink ones, the advantage they have is they are convenient and they can be more palatable at certain times of the day. So when I said in the morning, I have a scoop of protein in a shake because I normally work out afterwards and I want something that's easy to digest. I don't want a plate of chicken or I don't want eggs and so in the morning. So that's why I have it. But after a workout, unless I was maybe going straight from the gym to somewhere where I couldn't come home and eat, I would normally just come home and have my lunch or my dinner or something and make sure there's a reasonable size serving of protein there. And that's sufficient. Protein powder is one that you certainly do not need to have it. But if you are struggling to, say, hit that higher target through whole foods, then it can certainly be beneficial.
Fat around the belly. Hard one to shift for many people, including myself from time to time. One could say that we need to be doing more physical exercise. One might say that we need to be reducing calorie intake. And the other might say that we need to improve sleep quality. Another person might say that we have too much cortisol and that's contributing to the accumulation of fat. What's your take on it overall? It can be a little bit confusing. If some people are saying that it's all about stress and it's the increased cortisol that is contributing to fat in the belly, and then they're not saying anything about the food or physical exercise side of it. And I know you've written a couple of books on that as well, and I liked the title of it. It was almost that lose your fat, but it's not going to come back kind of thing.
Yeah, 101 ways to lose weight and never find it again.
Yeah, just never find it again. Yeah, it's good.
So this, you specifically mentioned fat around the waist. And for some people, when they are trying to lose weight, it may be that they want to particularly lose it from the hips or around the face and so on. Unfortunately, you can't target an area where to lose fat from. It's called the spot reduction myth. And it shows that doing abdominal exercises is not going to increase fat loss around the middle, or doing triceps kickbacks aren't going to increase or reduce bingo wings or anything like that. You can't choose where you lose fat from. And everyone is totally different based on your genetic makeup of where you're most likely to hold body fat. And normally it's just whatever worked to, if you are losing weight and you have lost weight and there's just the last bit to go, it's normally just keep doing what you're doing. It clearly works. And maybe you just need to further reduce the calories, or if you're already on a lower calorie intake, perhaps increase the exercise you're doing to increase that calorie expenditure. It's nothing drastic. And it's certainly not going to be you need to take this supplement to target fat loss from. That's all just noise. It's really just realize that when you are losing weight in the beginning, you have more body fat there to lose. So that's why the rates are often quicker at the start. And if you look at it as a percentage of your overall body weight, as you get leaner, that decreases. So it just becomes harder. And people get frustrated because of a lot of the nonsense claims that they see in the media, like 6 pounds in 6 hours and so on. And a lot of the time, the only way to lose the amount of weight that they purport would literally be to chop off a limb. That's the only way you're going to lose, and it's not going to be a lemon juice, cayenne pepper, celery detox. That is going to have zero effect. And there's also the difference between losing body fat and weight. So for most people, it's not really weight unless you are someone competing in a weight restricted sport. So if you're like a boxer, an MMA fighter, or a jockey or so on, it's not normally about weight. For general public, it's generally aesthetics and how they feel and look and how clothes feel and so on. So the weight on the scales isn't really important, because if you weighed yourself and then went to the bathroom after and weighed yourself again, you'd be lighter. If you drank like a pint of water after, you'd be heavier. You're seeing these fluctuations anyway, and it's not a reflection of your fat levels. That's weight, and it's irrelevant. So try and focus on things that, rather than just weight on the scales, measures like the feelings of clothes. Are they looser? Is my belt coming in? How do I look in the mirror? How do I feel? Am I more energetic? Am I able to recover from exercise? And focus more on process goals as opposed to outcome goals. So rather than thinking I want to be X weight by a certain amount of time, focus on the process. So things like, can I eat 5 servings of fruit and veg a day? Can I drink 2 liters of water a day? Can I make sure I have protein at breakfast every morning? Can I make sure that I get 10,000 steps a day on average across the space of a week, and so on? And by focusing on the process, you will probably achieve the outcome without going step on scales. Oh no, I'm up a pound. Oh no, I'm down a pound. And that horrible frustration that just plagues people.
Yeah, been there. You said 2 liters of water a day. Is there other benefits to that? Does it kind of switch off your appetite? So what it works like,
a flippant one there. It wasn't one that I'm really, guys, you must all drink 2 liters or more. So there is some evidence suggesting that, if people say, if you think you're hungry, have a drink of water and see if 20 minutes time if you're still hungry or if you're just thirsty. But it just one of those ones. It's not really at the forefront of what I'm telling people. Just try and stay hydrated. The 2 liters seems to be a good benchmark, but it's totally going to depend on how much you sweat, whereabout you are living, the humidity and so on. In sports performance, when I used to work with footballers, it was a bit graphic, but it was a P chart, and we literally had a P chart above urinals in all the football rooms. And if it was too dark, it was like drink more. And if it was light as straw, you're fine. And it used to be in football that if you failed the hydration test, footballers are renowned for, you have fines. So simple, and even at amateur level, there's always the fines list. And a lot of professional clubs will have, if you fail the hydration test, that's a fine. So
I'd love to know what the fine is, especially for the professional footballers, because to make a dent there, it has to be pretty high, huh?
Yeah, well, it was leaked. So when I did it, the clubs were just, £5, £10. But I remember several years ago, the Chelsea fines list was leaked. And it was, big money. If you called the manager mate, you were in serious trouble. That was a big fine, and late for training, big fines. So I think it was relative to their incomes.
So at the end of the week, you'd know all about it, huh?
Yeah.
Instead of 100,000 a week or whatever it is, you'd be down to 95.
Yeah.
What aspect, when I look at, you talked about your life journey at the start, and I'm always interested in that because I felt that there's some similarities with myself. We found something that we're quite passionate about. Can you just talk a little bit about that? Because very often I feel it's a massive improvement, or it's a massive contribution to people's quality of life, but people don't always find their forte. Yeah. And life, have you ever thought about it? Life kind of directed you in a certain way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is interesting when I do think back on it, because when I was at school, I played a lot of sport, but never to a high level. I played golf and badminton and volleyball and so on. And then went to uni, and I was in catered halls in first year. I wasn't studying nutrition. I studied geography and international relations as an undergrad. And in halls, because it was catered and I didn't really have a clue what I was doing, and going out drinking and ordering a pizza at 10 o'clock at night after playing some PlayStation, I ended up gaining weight quite a lot. And that's why I started going to the gym, as a lot of people do, thinking, okay, I've gained weight, therefore gym is the answer. But for me, I got really into it, and really changed my physique and got super involved. And the fitness modeling, as a result of that, it was the competitive spirit that I had. In my mind, I thought, how can I win at the gym? And there were a couple of ways I classed as winning at the gym. One would be competing in powerlifting or bodybuilding. And the other was, I want to be on a fitness magazine. That is, for me, I'd grown up reading, Men's Fitness and so on. That was winning at the gym. So I just did everything I could. I read everything I could. I knew it had to be a combination of elements. It had to be the training had to be on point from both the lifting and cardio to help increase that calorie expenditure. Diet had to be on point. I had to make sure the recovery was there so that I could keep training. I wasn't going to get injured. And yeah, like I said, it worked, and I ended up getting into the condition that I got on the front cover of a couple of these magazines. And from there, that's when everything really started to kick off, and people wanted the same thing. And that's how I ended up, like I said, working with people of those ages. But yeah, I never imagined to be in this position. I always kind of deep down wanted to work in sports, sort of, some capacity, but I didn't expect it to be nutrition, and certainly not now when most of my time is all focused on the recipes. So that's where it's interesting chatting about the weight loss and sports nutrition, because that's almost a previous chapter, because the current stage of life at the moment is all on the recipes, because in the meal plans that we would write people, the recipes were the most popular. People say, oh, I love this. And could you do more? Oh, you should do a recipe book. And I can't do it. Oh, no, you should. We love this. And so I thought, okay, we'll do a recipe book. And then we did a recipe book, just PDFs. And then oh, you should try and get a book deal. And yeah, try and get a book deal. As you know, it's not that easy. But eventually got the book deal, and the book got Sunday Times bestseller. So I did another one, and it did the same, recipes. And now a lot of people assume that I was maybe a chef or something. I've not had any culinary training. This is all just from self-taught. But it's the different stages in career, when it was essentially fitness modeling, creating plans for people in their 20s, to then the sports nutrition, worked in football for a bit. And then now we're at the simply just trying to help people cook and eat better through, they're going to be making dinner anyway, so let's try and optimize that dinner. So it's a very interesting, I'm trying to predict where it might go. I have no idea. There's been so much change in the last 10, 15 years. Who knows where I'll be when I'm 60.
But then you're comfortable with that change as well.
Yeah, just adapt. And that's it. Yeah. As I've grown older and my following has also aged as well, we're just sort of creating things that they want. And because I'm cooking for my kids, I know that a lot of people think, oh, okay, well, Scott's cooked this recipe and tested it. It's not going to be excessively spicy, or there's a high chance that my kids will like it as well. And that's just where we're at.
Your workday, because I'm a little bit curious. I just feel that I can't switch off in terms of work-life balance that well. Have you been able to achieve it? Everybody's talking about it. How achievable is it? Because again, you're self-employed. You're an author. You have your business. I'm in a similar boat. Not easy. Is it something that you consider? Have you looked around that aspect of it? I know it's not related to nutrition. I'm just interested in your kind of personal. No.
So I feel fortunate that I'm able to do what I do and get paid for it and not have a boss and pick and choose when I work and so on. And I've got to give a shout out to I can't remember when I discovered him, but there's an Aussie business guy called James Schramko, and he is very different to a lot of the business people that are all at the moment hustle and grind and 12-hour days and all this, and you can sleep when you're dead and all this nonsense. And he's the complete polar opposite of this. And what sums it up perfectly is his book is called Work Less and Make More. And his whole thing is...
that's a title that we all need to hear.
Yeah, it's Work Less and Make More. And this guy, James, I think he's mid to late 50s, and he surfs every day, and he only does calls once a week, and he does his other days, and he's super... that was always my goal of work-life balance. I always try and emulate what he's doing. And so for now, for example, I work 4 days. I don't work a Friday. I take my kids to school, every second day. My wife does other. I can go and pick them up at 3:00. I bike in, get them on the bike and so on. And I think as well that a lot of people focus on, they're busy being busy. And when somebody says, and it's, when you haven't seen somebody for a while, they say, oh, hey, Scott, how's it going? You keep them busy? And I always say, no, I'm not being busy. And the initial look is, oh my God, the business is having problems. I say, I'm not being busy, but I'm being productive. And I think that's the difference. So I've in recent years, I've really tried to just not sit at my desk because it's between the hours of 9 and 5. If I haven't had anything to do, I literally will have notes of tasks and have to do this, and this, and try and work my way through it. The other thing in recent years, this is more relevant for people who are self-employed or out of business, is less thinking of how can I, for a new skill, for example, rather than thinking, how can I do this? Thinking, who can do this? Outsource a lot more now with people who are just way better at doing whatever it would have been that I was doing, and allowing me to focus on the things that I can't outsource. And that's my unique skill set. So that's certainly helped to free up more time yeah.
Thanks very much for that. That was really good. Alcohol, what do you say to your clients? Is it a big no-no?
For most of the time, I say within moderation. So I'm an example. I mean, I don't drink during the week as a set rule. I can't remember when I would have had I know that's a lie. The last time we would have had a beer on a Wednesday would have been on holiday. That's the only time I would drink during the week. The rest of the time, it's just Friday, Saturday, couple of beers, or we'll open a bottle of wine on a Friday and have it over the weekend. I drink a lot less now than I was never a big drinker, but now that I'm paying more attention to my health and the other aspects of it, so like the breathing, which is obviously how we connected, paying a lot more attention to sleep and so on, I can see the difference. And when I'm tracking my sleep, that alcohol has on it. So it's making me want to have less. But for clients, we say the same. Yeah, obviously it's calorific. We want to try and avoid drinking our calories. And it does have that suppression of fat loss while the alcohol is in the system. So if you are trying to lose weight, then yes, it's certainly something you want to seriously think about reducing completely. But whether you want to go teetotal or not for the duration, it's up to you. I mean, when I was doing the fitness thing, I actually did natural bodybuilding at the time. And for the show, it was like about a 5-month prep coming into it. And I had a beer every week in that prep to bodybuilding. And that's to get to super, super stage lean. And you're still able to include alcohol because it was just that idea of moderation. And rather than cutting out completely and having to go on when people go on a binge afterwards, you often don't need that. But it's totally dependent on the people. And sometimes people, if they have the thing in the house, they'll eat it. So whether it's chocolate or crisps and so on, and they might say, well, just for me, if it's not in the house, it's not there, so I won't eat it. It's easier. And other people can have the chocolate in the house and say, no, I'm only going to have one piece of chocolate after dinner on a day of exercise and so on. It's very personal. And I think that's something that's often missed in nutrition is people subscribe to these regimented approaches and they don't tailor it for their own needs, and they just struggle with it because X influencer that they're following does this. They train, they get up at 5 a.m, they go and lift, and then they do their journal, and then blah 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 blah, and then this person just who's got 3 kids doesn't live wherever and has to do such and such. It's just not realistic for them, and they feel frustrated. So take whatever approach you're trying to follow and modify it for your own life. And that's why I like this habit approach, which I spoke about in the book of 101 Ways, is rather than saying, okay, we're following this set meal plan, we're going to do habits instead. So like we touched upon, 2 liters of water, that was one habit, or have protein at breakfast, or try and exercise 30 minutes per day for a week and so on. These are the things that work, and they're the kind of things you can see yourself continuing to do, as opposed to, God, I've lost all the weight, I'm not going to say, I'm not going to drink 2 liters of water anymore, or because it's become that habit.
So you mentioned breathing, and I'm intrigued. And that's how we initially made contact with. This was quite new to you. Just as I know hardly anything about nutrition, you were new to breathing. I'd love to hear a little bit about your experience with it. Were you surprised? Well, did you think that breathing was, because very often I feel that when people think about breathing, they think, take a deep breath, or my breathing is nothing wrong with my breathing. I don't need to do anything with it,
Well, hopefully when I tell you this, your headphones won't have to go a size bigger because no, but in all seriousness, it's the book this is why, for the listener, we are connecting, because I reached out to you to say I read your book and I found it transformative, and then you'd like to chat about nutrition afterwards. So it was because of your work that this is happening. And it was that sort of piece of the puzzle that I had been missing. So I was exercising, cardio and weights. I was eating well. I was sleeping well. I was doing sauna and cold plunge and all these things. Breathing was just, I'd never even considered it. It was just something that you do. And then I read Breath by James Nestor, and you were referenced in it. And then I Googled you and listened to you on the podcast. Rangan Chatterjee, his podcast is that one. And then I bought your book and then read that and then started listening to your podcast and I'm bought into it. But straight away from your style, I was doing all the things that you're telling people, mouth taping at night, and which I'd always thought, this is faddy and it's just, but then since doing it, because I'm tracking my sleep using my Oura Ring, I see the quality of my sleep improve. So I'm like, okay, maybe this doesn't apply to everyone, but I am personally noticing a benefit from it, so I'm going to keep doing it. I was doing a mixture of your breathing exercises along with some sort of static apnea stuff from freediving, because it's always something I've wanted to do. When you go on holiday and you go to Turkey and you jump off the boat, I want to be able to swim down and look at the fish for longer. So I've always been interested in the idea of freediving a bit more as I've been doing some of those apnea trainings as well. And like we talked about offline before we hit record, I've seen this huge increase in my VO2 max. And the only real difference from training is I've added in one extra low run per week. So it's not really there, but I've been nailing the breathing consistently now for months. Badminton's my main sport, play 2 to 3 times a week, consciously doing nasal breathing there. I'm noticing a huge improvement. So not only to my sleep, but I feel a lot fitter. Playing badminton, I'm recovering much quicker between rallies. And it's a lot of things that I come across in this fitness and nutrition space are faddy. And there's nothing really that I've been that on board with recently. But this is something that has made a significant improvement to my own routine. And it's one of those, I wish I'd known about this earlier. So that's why I said, I went out and bought 10 copies of your book, because I've never done that. I've never bought as many copies of one book other than my own to give to people. It's the first time. And mum and friends and anyone who's into doing sport, I'm like, you got to read this. And they say, what's it about? And I said, well, the too long didn't read version is just breathe through your nose. But if you read the book, you can understand why and things you can do. It's been great.
That's super. Thanks very much. And I suppose this is what makes it all. I think there's similarities as well. I've always wanted to try and make breathing accessible and simple for people and to bring it into their way of life. I think it's a tremendous pillar of health, even just in terms of getting out of one's head. And, I put in probably there is a chapter in the Oxygen Advantage, which I won't include in the revised edition when I have to revise, and that was about weight loss. And we were kind of seeing it, but was very, very, we were seeing changes in people's weight loss, but we couldn't pin it down. And then the more we looked at it, we couldn't reproduce it. So that would be one change that I would make to it. But other than that, a book that was written, 14 years ago? I started writing it in 2012. All of the content is pretty much as relevant now, as it was back then. Your VO2 max numbers, you mentioned the numbers earlier on. Would you mind sharing them with the listener just to say the significance?
We're using an Apple Watch for it. So these aren't lab tested results, but it's, fairly accurate for a consumer facing product. And the end or sort of middle of January, it was sitting around 44. And as of yesterday, I'm up to 51.9. At the time of recording, we're on the 4th of March. So we're looking at a month and 3 quarters of significant change. And the only change to exercise has been the inclusion of one 30-minute run, which I don't think is enough to elicit that great a change. I think it is because of the change to the breathing I walk the dog several times a day. So that is all done doing nasal breathing. We do some of the dynamic apnea on the walks that you've talked about in your book and in your app, and a mixture of the breathing exercises in your app and also the static apnea one. So, but again, it's all, if you looked at my fitness regime as a whole, this is the big change. It's the breathing. It's not, because sometimes people, they get attribution bias and they do, for example, low carb diet and lose a load of weight and say, carbs are the enemy. You've got to cut out carbs and you'll lose weight, and say, well, you didn't lose weight because of the carbs as such. You lost weight because you were reducing your carb intake. You were consuming less calories overall. It was due to the calories that you lost weight. So it's not the carbs, it was the calories. But for me, I feel like I've been quite objective with this, and I have an understanding of what else I've done and what is the standard baseline for me. And the breathing is the big change, and that's why I'm confident to recommend it to people.
That's great. And did you find it difficult or strange when you started switching to nasal breathing? Did it take much of an awareness, that you were paying attention to it, or what was it like?
The first time I started doing nasal breathing, I think I was maybe 200 yards out of my house, and I was going, like a lot of people do, and thinking, I'm going to be exhausted by the time I get, half an hour walk. So that was hard. And now it's just second nature. I sort of think, I remember when I first walked up that hill, I sort of do a standard loop at lunchtime. That was challenging. Now it's normal. And the first time I did mouth taping at night, when I was trying to go to sleep, I was thinking, this isn't going to last. I'm going to have to take this off in about 10 minutes. Got through the night. Next morning, woke up, and every breath I took through my nose, I felt like my nose had enlarged by, must be like 2-3 times bigger. I was just much more comfortable. And now tape goes on at night, I'm out like a light. But it makes a big difference.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like, it's taken about 20 years for taping. And we have a tape that goes around the mouth as well, because there can be a risk with some people just covering the mouth closed.
Yeah.
But
I've seen you've got the beard taping one. That always makes me have a beard specific tape, because I have to
myself. I'm the model on the packet, actually.
I've had to shave more often since doing mouth tape, because normally I'd shave once a week and then just grow out a beard. But then when I put the tape on, it doesn't stick if I've got some. So I'm having to, wet shave more often than I've ever done in my life. But it's not too bad.
We had to cater for the 40% of men, so we'll send you a pack of Mayo tape. I'll drop you a note after this. Scott, you talked about habits, and you talked about it a couple of times, and it's almost as if you feel, or at least my reading from it is that unless you actually help your client or your readers to develop a habit, it's simply not going to work. Can you just go in a little bit deeper into that? And you also talk about small steps, that aspect of it.
Yeah. So a phrase that I use all the time, and if anyone has ever heard me talk on a podcast before, they will have heard this, and that is, it's better to be consistently good than occasionally perfect. And that is crucial, because what we're looking at is these consistently good habits for 80% of the time, as opposed to the complete perfection, because it is, like I said, we've touched upon it already, it's too different to what you classify as your normal way of eating or your normal form of exercise. So the habit approach works because it gives you a much bigger range of things you can pick from, as opposed to just subscribing to the set method. So what we'll often say to people is, right, 3 things. 1, what do you think you could eat more of? So they will, well, maybe more fruits and more vegetables. Maybe it is more protein. Maybe it's more fish, whatever. Okay, fine. What do you think you could eat less of? So we're not saying what you're not going to eat at all. We're saying less. Could maybe not eat crisps every day. I might not have a bit of chocolate after my dinner. Okay, question 3. How are we going to do it? What's the easiest way that we can fit this into your routine? And it's trying to just make people realize that they don't have to do the set diet. It's making it relevant to them. There are other things you can do as well. Habit charts, like with the kids, they do a star chart. You can do that for adults. There's various apps you can use in the phone, or one that I used to recommend to people was you would get family buy-in from whatever habit. So if mum and dad had their 3 habits, if they did it every day for 30 days, kids would get something as a result, but like a family day, like, okay, if dad does these habits for every day for the next 30 days, we'll go to the trampoline park. And like kids are like, Dad, have you done it? And it's, it's like the peer pressure within the family of getting you to stick with it, which is getting on the other end of the spectrum is much harder if you don't have the family buy-in to support whatever change you're trying to do. And you may find that there is the resistance in the household if it is the case of the extreme method of, well, dad's on the low carb diet now, kids, so none of y'all can have pasta for dinner either. And my God, that is just rubbish. Like, why are you doing that? So you don't have to. Dad can still eat pasta. We're just going to measure the quantity first. So rather than like a free pour from the bag and you go, wow, that's 200 grams, you go, right, Dad's on 75 grams of pasta. You can still have your pasta. So it's these little things, and it's always avoiding extremism. I can't remember if I said it already, but the other soundbite for you is the only restriction should be to avoid unnecessary restriction. Because people unnecessarily restrict all the time.
No, I really like
that.
that.
Was your question? Did I even answer? I went on such a tangent there.
But you obviously came across it with your students that some of them were challenged or felt challenged that they weren't able to develop it into a consistent. So what you did, you made it very simple, straightforward, those 3 points. What's more that you can eat? What's less? What food would you eat less of? And how do you make it happen? And it's all very, very straightforward. So,
and that's how the listener's thinking, okay, what can I do? Well, just ask yourself those 3 questions. What could I eat more of? What could I eat less of? And what's the easiest way that I can do it?
Because
can I just touch one thing there? In terms of the easiest way to achieve this is often doing a little bit of meal prep. So it may seem a bit Jim Bro having the glass Tupperware jars out, but if that helps you, if you, again, in someone's situation might say, well, I come home from work, I don't get home from work by the time I've commuted and so on, it's 6:30 and then I've got to go to the gym. I don't have time to cook. That's fine. I don't cook every day. I probably cook 4 times out of 7. The rest is a reheat job from the freezer or something. So if we've been out the whole day, kids are hungry, I know in the freezer I've got 4 portion boxes of bolognese, I've got stews, I've got curries, I've got whatever. So it goes boom, microwave. There's always frozen veg in case there's no fresh. Boom, and what carbs are we having? Rice, pasta, potato, whatever. It's there, and it's just because of plan. The freezer is always full of stuff, and that's when things like slow cooker is great. So on a Sunday, bung everything, lid on, boom. I mean, I think I got 13 portions of bolognese from the slow cooker at the weekend. So it's, it's great for time, and it's just that bit of prep that you need to do.
And could it be a case as well that very often people who are struggling are people who are tired, so it's never just about their nutrition, but they also could have a lot of stress and anxiety and worrying that's going on in their life. They're tired, and it's almost that they're feeling a failure with that. So what you're doing is making it so easy that each little step is a success, and that's 100%. The motivating factor all the way through. Have you delved into sleep at all? Say, for example, people who are tired and what foods that they may gravitate towards. I was writing a book on sleep, and I looked at teenagers, for example. Teenagers who are sleepy are more likely to take drugs. That was one of the studies. They're more likely to partake in risk-taking behavior. And one aspect of it, if you wake up feeling lousy, nature often dictates that you're going to gravitate towards foods that are going to give you an instant hit. And these foods aren't necessarily the good ones. Does tiredness play a role with your students, with your clients, does it ever come into your work?
Yes. So the thing that how involves me most when we were working with people one-to-one previously would be, I feel tired all the time. Are there any supplements I could take that would make me feel less tired? And say, okay, how much sleep you get in a night? 6 hours? 5 hours, right? There's the problem. Is nothing to do with supplementation or your diet. Is the simplest answer is often, the correct one. So we just need to focus on getting more sleep as opposed to supplement your way through it. So, but again, obviously, if you are tired, then there is going to be there'd be knock-on effects throughout the day. If you're tired, you've woken up later in the morning, you've less time to prepare a nutritious breakfast. You might not have eaten. You might just have grabbed something. So you're going to get this possible spike in blood sugar. It's got to drop. You're going to grab something again when you get to the train station because that thing you had an hour ago wasn't sufficient. And then you're really hungry when you come to lunch and you just want something quick and convenient. And then this can go on the whole day. And then you get home, you're exhausted. You're meant to go to the workout class with your pal, but you've got no energy. So you just go stay at home on the sofa and go watch the football and have a beer and open a pack of Walkers, since like big pack, it can have a terrible impact on it from that being tired. So like breathing, I mean, sleep is something we have to do, but I think people just consider it like, wow, that's just what we do. You go to bed at night without really thinking about sleep hygiene and the sleep environment and the actual why are we sleeping? So for me, sleep is super important. And Matthew Walker in his book, and I read that, and it had made a significant difference to me. And I track my sleep using an Oura ring at night, and I quite fancy one of those thermoregulated mattresses at the moment, but I can't justify the cost yet because it seems very expensive, but they look great. But for me, it's really important. I think when people realize that should form part of their workout routine or their fitness routine is exercise, fitness, sleep, breathing. Sleep is in there too.
And it is. And it's also to make it accessible because, it's not that there's one more thing to do. It's just about the awareness of what you're already doing and tweaking it. Do you scroll much on social media? The only reason I say it, I got rid of all apps. I got rid of LinkedIn. I can't get access to it on my phone. TikTok, Instagram and Facebook. I have none of those apps on my phone. And I did it deliberately because I felt that, well, I suppose I was thinking about the platforms and almost that these platforms were devised to take my attention. And because it was kind of underhand, that they were making us addicted to the apps, it says, okay, I'm not going to give into that and I don't want to give them my attention. But that would have been a factor that you talked about with sleep, especially with teenagers. What's your take on it? Because you're quite involved with social media. We are too. I'm lucky enough I have a team here. What do you do with it in terms of your work?
I think I'm the same. I'm the same as what you said. So it started for me by not having work emails on my phone. That was the first step. And then I used to delete Instagram at the weekend and I would keep it during the week because this was before you could post on the desktop. I had to be on the phone. And now at the point when I have no news apps on my phone, I have no work email, I have no social media apps. But not only that, Patrick, this is where it gets extreme. My wife has my screen time code that I don't know it. So I can't even, I'll sneakily download this app and have a look at whatever. I have to go to her, hold my phone like this for her, put the code in. And then, if I have to download something. It was funny because I joined a new gym the other day and they have this keyless entry that uses the phone. And the guy says, just download the app again. I'm like, sorry, I need my wife's help first. So can you let me in? And next time I'll download it. But yeah, I don't have them on my phone. And like you said there, you do use social media a lot. And so do I have done since the beginning. And it's a huge part of being able to do what I do is from the following on social media. But I don't use it personally. And the only time I'm really on social media is maybe looking for ideas or if I get sucked into the scrolling, but it's just on the computer and then I realize I'm doing it and I turn it off.
It's one of those things, I suppose, modern living. We didn't have to consider it 20 years ago, but obviously we do now. So for the future is going to look very bright for you, Scott. I really like your approach and also in terms of it's almost that you're putting it out there and you know that it is going to change direction. Do you see that there's a greater uplift in terms of, I'm 52 years of age. When I was 20 and, into our 30s, we weren't so massively into the gym. We weren't massively into our health. We weren't like the pub culture is quite strong here in Ireland and I'm sure it's similar enough in Scotland as well. But the next group of kids coming along, it seems to have changed there. Have you noticed that? Like, do many of your followers, your subscribers, are you getting to the younger? Are they interested in what you do?
So my following is largely between 40 and 60, so older than me. So before it was the same, and now my following is older. But I think rather than looking at the younger generation, in terms of what you said there of how when you were younger, you weren't really, there's more pub culture, less emphasis on health and fitness. In my time, looking at who's going to the gym is changing a lot for the better, because the other day I was in the gym, the one that I've just joined, is lots of the High Rocks stuff. It would have been CrossFit. They've modified a bit because CrossFit seems to have dropped out of favor. And there's lots of bodybuilding stuff in it. There's lots of cardio. It's just a huge gym with lots of stuff. And there are people there, like elderly folks, and doing deadlifts together. And it's just great. You would never have seen that before because we're just realizing that the evidence is there of minimizing muscle loss when you're older, and we're trying to hold on to as much muscle as possible. So we're just, the demographic of who's going to the gym is way more representative of society as a whole, as opposed to a small niche of people who are trying to lose weight or bulk up. People are realizing it has a lot of health benefits too. So I think that's fantastic. I also think that there is less bickering happening within the fitness industry. I wouldn't really class myself as being in the fitness industry anymore. Back in the day, I would have said that's what I mean. Now it's more just I cook for people. But I think there's a lot less bickering or extremism or this sort of warring between high carbers and low carbs. And when I was in, when I started out, it was the whole IIFYM. I don't know if you've come across that. It was called If It Fits Your Macros. And it was the two camps were those who said, you could eat anything you like so long as it fits your macro targets or calories. And then the other side were called the clean eaters, who were the chicken, broccoli, brown rice 9 times a day. And it was and it was just ridiculous, because if you want to do chicken, broccoli, brown rice 9 times a day, fine. If you want to hit your carb allowance by eating Pop-Tarts, do what you want. I don't care. There seems to be less of that happening, which is good. And the science is guiding more of the best practice now as well. So before, you were having a lot of things that were happening in the gym that was based on anecdotes or, oh, we've always done it that way, or stuff that came down from sort of bodybuilding circles into the mainstream. And it just wasn't applicable to everyday folks. Whereas now, because we've got all these different approaches like high rocks or just lifting to get stronger or minimize injury, it's more evidence-based and we're not doing silly things as much. I think it's just getting better and better and better.
Great. I really enjoyed the conversation. For the last and final words, how are people to make contact with you? Do you have 4 books or 5 books? Or do you have more?
3 books.
Sorry, 3 books.
3 books. 3 books, 2 recipe books and a weight loss book. Well, so unfortunately, we mentioned this offline that there doesn't seem to be many other Scott Bapties. So if you just pop me into Google, you can find my website or follow me on social. But also one thing as well, this is an easy one for somebody to remember. If you just go on podcastgift.com, I'll send you, I think it's set up to send a high protein soup recipe book because that's the time of year. So podcastgift.co.uk, pop your name and email in and I'll send you this.
Oh, it sounds lovely. I'll be saying that to Sinead downstairs and she'll drop you a line, so she will. Scott, an absolute pleasure. Thanks very much. It was really informative in terms of your explanation and the clarity of answering the questions. So that was really good. So yeah, it's a pleasure.
No,
thank you.
Pleasure's all mine. Thank you for having me on and thanks for doing what you're doing. And like I said, it's one of the most significant improvements to my health routine is discovering breathing. So thank you for that.
Amazing. Thanks for that.
Thank you for listening to the Oxygen Advantage podcast. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe and maybe take the time to leave us a review. The Oxygen Advantage podcast is available from all your podcast providers.